Wherever you are in the world, welcome to the Theos Cybernova podcast. My name is Paul Jackson, your host, and before we begin, I've got a quick favor to ask from you. There's one simple way that you can support our show, and that's by hitting that follow or subscribe button on the app you're listening to the show on right now. It makes a huge difference in helping get the show out there to as many people as possible. So please give us a hand and click that button now.
The Theos Cybernova podcast, hosted by Paul Jackson.
So, here we go with yet another fantastic episode of Theos Cybernova podcast, episode 12. I'm Paul Jackson, and each week I'm digging into the latest trends, challenges, and innovations shaping the cybersecurity landscape, as well as talking to a fantastic mix of leading industry experts, thought leaders, legal eagles, and technologists with a particular focus on the Asia-Pacific region. So, whether you're a professional in the field or simply curious about staying safe in the digital age, we hope Theos Cybernova will offer up valuable knowledge and actionable insights for everyone. Today, I'm delighted to welcome Anna Gamvros to the show. Anna is a partner with A&O Shearman and a leading light in the legal circles in our region. Anna, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me today, Paul. I'm very excited to talk to you.
Yes. So first of all, A&O Shearman. So obviously this is a bit of a change last year, A&O Shearman. Could you talk us through this merger? Because, some like myself may have overlooked this.
Yeah, very happy to. So it was a very exciting moment in our firm, or in our new firms, as I should say. We were Allen & Overy, leading UK or global firm, and Shearman & Sterling. The two firms have come together to create A&O Shearman. And the whole sort of idea behind this merger was really to bring together a firm with an exceptional footprint for the UK and the rest of the world, with a very strong US firm. Because many firms that you look at globally have either that rest of world presence or a very strong US presence. But the two together didn't exist before our merger. So by bringing together a leading US firm with some overseas presence and a leading rest of world, I'll call it, firm with some US presence, we brought the best of the world together to create really what we think is a novel and premier law firm to provide an offering to our clients.
Fantastic. It sounds like a real powerhouse. I mean, you must be really proud to be there. So
very proud to be there and very proud to be part of it.
Fantastic. Yes. Yeah. So look, before we go any further, let's tell your story, right? How did your career start? I mean, I've known you for quite a while now, and you've always been the leading light, in our part of the world. And how did you get to this point?
Well, it's all started in humble Brisbane, and I like to think, and this will really date me and show my age, I like to think that my interest in technology law and technology issues started with the Y2K bug. So, back in the late 90s, when we all thought the world was going to end, when we ticked over to the year 2000, this was a really new and exciting issue that lawyers hadn't worked on before. And I'd been doing some IP before that and a little bit of technology contract work, which was very new. But this was a new and exciting thing. And we were doing something new and something with no precedent. Now, nothing happened, which was great because, as I was holding my brick phone on New Year's Eve, waiting for it not to work and to be called, we were able to enjoy our New Year's celebrations and go on. But this really made me realize that there was going to be, or that there was beginning, an area of law really focused on something new and that would always continue to change. So since that time, my career has really evolved from sort of that advisory work into technology contract work. So we were doing software contracts when they were new. Of course, now they're not so exciting. That evolved into large-scale outsourcing contracts where we were moving people and assets and data. And then data obviously started to become a focus. There was very few significant privacy laws in the world, and particularly in the APAC region. I moved to Hong Kong sort of in the middle of my outsourcing days in 2001, where we sort of had Hong Kong's privacy law. Australia had not what the privacy law it has today, but some degree of privacy law. And there are a few scattered bits and pieces around the region. but not a lot. Sort of then around about 2005, we had sort of Korea pop up, and then, we had more laws pop up in the ensuing years in Singapore and Malaysia and the Philippines, Taiwan. And all of a sudden there was a really interesting body of law that really no one knew a lot about, and that, we were trying to work out how it applies and what it applies to. And that's fascinated me again in my sort of quest for doing new things without precedent. So that's kind of how I found I was interested, and no one else was doing it. So I sort of started to create an expertise and sort of carved my niche in data protection law in APAC. Now, happily, there are many others that also do that now, but it was really something new and interesting. That sort of kind of rolled into, all of a sudden, those clients whose data we'd been helping protect all those years started to get hacked.
Right.
And what do you do then? Well, I mean, you and I know well, and there were no breach notification laws in Asia back when we started looking at breach notification. So, and, very much clients were like, well, do I just clean it up and not tell anyone? Which actually was what could happen, prior to all of these laws. So we sort of started advising clients on that. And then obviously what followed very quickly and very much as a sort of a waterfall after GDPR in the UK was a body of cyber-related laws, breach notification laws, particularly, where now clients in this part of the world in particular had to tell someone, had to do something where they'd been the subject of a cyber incident. So hence we then rolled into the kind of the cyber incident response phase of my career, which I find fascinating. And we started to work together during that period. And now, and that's become a really big part of my practice, preparing clients for cyber incidents and responding. And now we're rolling into a new phase as obviously AI, and clients are asking questions about AI, and we're seeing new laws and new issues that we have to look at. So, I mean, that's what I love about this practice area, is that, we have to kind of roll with the punches a little bit and the new laws. And, sometimes we are making it up as we go along, but, I feel like we're doing that with a pretty good background of having to make those interpretations and apply what we know and the laws to new situations.
When you talked about the Y2K bug, you had me getting flashbacks to my time in the Hong Kong police, when everyone was panicking about this, and I was in the Crime Prevention Bureau at the time, the computer security unit, and it was. But as you're right, it just fizzled out, didn't it? And we just seemed to carry on as normal. But I would never have guessed you went back that far, though, Anna.
Well, that's good.
True. Before we jump onto more privacy stuff, though, I was curious. You just mentioned preparing companies for crisis. Are you doing how are you doing this? Are you doing it in tabletop, or are you just helping them prepare their plans? With a legal, obviously, component to that. How does that actually work? Yeah,
look, we are helping them obviously prepare their plans and review their plans, trying to give them a holistic picture that, trying to bring together the technical teams, the legal teams, the risk teams, the management teams to understand that, a significant incident is a whole of organization response. And then we are working with our clients to test them in tabletops and scenarios. That's a really, really important part of our incident preparation. We also have built out an incident response hotline where our clients have access to us, not me personally, but our teams on a 24/7, 365 basis. We do that by engaging our clients, making sure that we understand their plans, so that if they do call the line, we can trigger their response as they had intended, and with the vendors that they want to use, be it forensics, comms, ransomware negotiators, whoever they need, we know who they need to pull in to start the immediate triage. So we're doing that, as well as a lot of what we're doing is around preparing boards. Obviously we're seeing a sharper focus now into board member knowledge of cyber incidents, and also boards as a whole, as the decision making and the information that they're receiving from their organizations around cyber issues. Increasing focus from regulators, increasing focus from courts, looking at liability of directors and making those decisions. So that's a really important focus in helping us prepare, from board down our clients for cyber incidents.
It's really interesting because that actually meshes exactly with the kind of work that I'm doing now as well. Obviously, in my new role as CEO, I'm less hands-on in terms of the investigation side of things, but more focused on, as you say, board briefings, board awareness, helping them to navigate the risk management of an incident, and also, of course, leading tabletop exercises when they're high level, when we're working with excos, etc. So it's very interesting that you're seeing the same kind of demand for those kind of services as well, and it's good to see, because it just shows or demonstrates that leadership across our region are perhaps taking cyber more seriously day by day.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we're finding a fascination at board level in ransomware and what to do. When do we pay? What questions do we need to ask? And, it's everyone loves to hear war stories and talk ransom in a cyber context. So
for sure.
But when you actually sit down with a board and actually ask them to talk through what questions do they have and what's their kind of decision tree, and how would they begin to address an issue if their companies were faced with a ransom, it's very interesting to see. There's often a lot of fist thumping on the table. No, we don't negotiate with criminals until you start to present what the scenario could look like and the reasons why there may need to be considerations on both sides, and the information that they need to ask for. It's a very interesting. You get very interesting discussions and follow-on questions.
100%.
As I'm sure you know better than anyone else.
I do. I'm always fascinated because I presented to boards right in all the countries. Well, not all, but pretty much all the countries across the region, and there's definitely a different dynamic depending on the location across Southeast Asia. But what I am seeing is a lot of questions, a lot of feedback, and a lot of, it's not something they're doing to tick a box anymore. This is now genuinely right at the top of their radar, and managing those risks is essential. So it's good to see, and it's encouraging as well, as is the sort of dynamic around the strengthening of laws in our region, which we'll touch on in a moment. But before we do that, you also have a secondary role, don't you, in the IAPP? And perhaps you talk us through your role there and what the IAPP does, and how listeners may want to get involved.
Yes, so the IAPP, originally IAPP stood for International Association of Privacy Professionals. However, the IAPP now has expanded its mandate to cover professionals in privacy, AI governance, and cybersecurity in particular, given that many historic privacy professionals now have to cover that kind of suite of subject matter. And the interesting thing about it is the IPP in particular has had a very big focus recently on trying to get their arms around the scope of digital laws that what was once called a chief privacy officer now has to consider as part of their roles. And we had a leadership kind of summit last year where the theme was really chief privacy officer, and because everyone has an and now, it's and AI governance officer and data ethics officer and cybersecurity. There are so many different parts to this role because there's so many overlapping aspects with respect to data. So the IAPP really is an organization which provides education, certification, and networking for professionals in those subject matters. I sit on the board of directors, which I'm very privileged to do with some fantastic individuals. Over the years, I've been very involved in the IAPP and sat on that we have the Knowledge Net in Hong Kong, which I was sort of one of the founding members of, which is a networking group in Hong Kong. Also on the First Asia Advisory Board, which is responsible for networking and working on issues in the region. It's at the Asia CIPPA, which is an exam on Asian data privacy, and helps choose the topics for the conference in Asia, which is held in Singapore in July. Then I was on the Women Leading Privacy Board as well, where, obviously focus there on networking and women in the privacy profession. Although the privacy profession is one of those professions where there is a large number of women in senior roles, which is fantastic. So now on the board, it's a 5-year term, and I'm in year 4, and it's been fantastic. So I'm headed off to the global conference that is held every year in Washington, DC, later this month.
So it's a bit like a president. You don't get an opportunity for a second term or...
No second term, no.
No, I'm, obviously we go back a long way, and I'm fully aware of the amazing work that you do. And I've been privileged to speak at a couple of events with the IAPP as well. And it's a fantastic mix of audience and asking all the right questions, I find. So, kudos to you and the entire group there. It's, and those who are more interested, especially those in Hong Kong who want to join those knowledge sessions, because they are good. I remember speaking at one of those a few years back, but they are fantastic events. So perhaps they could reach out to you if they have any interest to learn more.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think it's great that, the IAPP has expanded its kind of subject matter realm to include AI and cybersecurity now beyond privacy, even though that was always part of the discussion, but obviously, particularly in the last few years with AI, we've had to pivot very quickly, and they set up a separate sort of AI governance body of knowledge, and there's a separate exam now with respect to AI governance. So, it's been a very exciting time for the IAPP to grow its member base and to grow what it can do for its member base, sort of responding to what is needed and the changes that the professionals in our space are facing.
I was going to ask you about AI later in this episode, but we've touched on it now, so let's continue a little bit. But this is a challenging aspect for privacy, isn't it? How do you, combat the theft of identity, if you like, using deepfake, etc. technology? It must be one of the hot topics within the community. What are your thoughts on this? I mean, what are our solutions, or do we not really have any at the moment, given the technology?
Well, I think, it's the $64 million question. Everyone is responsible use of AI is what we obviously advocate as lawyers and, as privacy professionals. And, when we're dealing with our own clients who are asking about AI and AI governance, you're trying to make sure that the tools and the training data and how their AI use cases are set up sort of from the get-go are done in a responsible way, only using personal data where they have permission to do so with the same as any other usage of personal data. I mean, what has become difficult is the fact that there are tools which can scoop up data, at a rate and speed that we haven't been able to see before. And there is so much data about us sitting freely available
for sure
on the internet that many of us have put out there ourselves, right? So
yes,
not for AI tools to hoover up and create deep fakes of ourselves, but it's a very difficult issue to face when, we can ask our own clients and organizations to be responsible, but there are always going to be unethical actors. And this is another usage of personal data that's in the public domain that is, very difficult for us to control. And it's obviously a lot scarier in a way than we've seen in the past, where we've looked at scraping or other misuses of data. So yeah, it's definitely a trickier one. I mean, from a cyber perspective, we're having to make it, as part of a training and re-education of our clients, beyond phishing now, it's like looking out for things like deep fakes and creating a new heightened level, a new level of sensitivity around questioning instructions, questioning phone calls, questioning messages even, because, AI is also creating better phishing emails and all those types of things. So we are definitely changing the way that we're getting our clients to even train their own staff to be, become aware of these risks and potential, issues that they might face.
So one of the hot topics in Hong Kong was obviously that fraud that everyone knows about now, the video deepfake.
Yeah.
Are the laws keeping up with it? I mean, what should, the legal system, if you like, be doing, not just Hong Kong, but everywhere, in order to perhaps deter or make it much more severe offense to impersonate individuals using deepfake? Is that happening, or is it something that's a way off yet?
Well, it's kind of another form of it's another way for threat actors to infiltrate the systems, and we know that laws aren't stopping threat actors from using ransomware, and that there are definitely avenues that law enforcement follows to try and find the threat actors. But I think that's still the response. all of these things are illegal, to impersonate someone, to use impersonation to appropriate funds. They're all illegal, but it's very difficult, as it is in any other kind of cyber incident, to find the perpetrator.
Yes, sure.
And I mean, you know that better than anyone else.
I know exactly. Yeah, right.
And this becomes the issue because the perpetrators are even more hidden when they're using deepfake technology to,
Yeah, I don't want to deviate away from corporate sort of, but I was just in the UK, and in the news there was a sad story of a teenager, committing suicide because somebody had created deepfake of that girl, and in compromising positions, and those kind of things are only going to increase, aren't they, unless something is done. But what can be done?
Yeah, look, I mean, as a mother as well, I worry about these things. Any parent does. It's that, and we know that children of generation that our children are, they love to post videos and photos and all of the material that can be used for deepfake purposes. And so, I remind my children that could happen, and that's what that data could be used for. I mean, obviously I'm probably more sensitive to it than many, but yeah, I mean, on that level, it's incredibly scary.
It definitely is.
It's another threat that, that we have to be very, very aware of. And it's education.
Education,
it's
that's
for
what I was
our
about
own
to say.
families or for employees of companies, right?
Yep. Unfortunately, it's like all these scams, frauds, etc. It all boils down to education at the end of the day, because unfortunately, as you rightly say, the laws aren't going to deter them, and it's difficult for enforcement. So education is key. All right, so let's switch gears slightly and talk about data privacy laws in Hong Kong. Now, this is something that people moan about constantly because, I'm trying to cast back my memory, but I do remember it must have been around 1997, and I haven't got a cheat sheet in front of me, so I don't know. But because I remember very well that at that time I was moved in the Hong Kong police into a new unit that had to deal with telecommunications companies. The mobile phone companies were just setting up around 96, 97. And I was asked to lead that unit because I had a telecoms background. And of course, I had to deal with the new privacy law that had just come in order to get data off those companies. And so I had to read that one backwards and forwards. But it hasn't changed much since then. And that's 97 or whenever it was, right? So what are your thoughts on the data privacy laws, and when are we going to see a modernization and update on these?
It's another $64 million question. So yeah, you're right with your timing. The only real updates that we've seen was around 2008, I think, with the octopus incident, where we got our direct marketing laws. I think it was 2008, 2010. And they are still some of the most stringent direct marketing laws in the world in terms of the information and consent requirements. We have to give very, very specific information in Hong Kong about how we use data for direct marketing purposes. It's quite contrast to, what we need to do around data collection, protection under, for any other use of data in Hong Kong. We then saw the doxing laws that came in a few years ago, and they were supposed to be part of a suite of dates to the law. There was going to be new requirements around data retention, breach notification. There were going to be some new powers for the Privacy Commissioner, some new penalties, and the doxing laws. So we got the doxing laws, which are again quite novel to Hong Kong. There are doxing laws in other parts of the world, but ours are very unique. And the latest is that the rest of the reforms are not going to follow. So we're kind of back with a blank slate. But Hong Kong's law, as they were slated back then, so it doesn't mean that there won't necessarily be reforms, but those have moved on. And they had come in, and I do think it was 5 years ago. I think it was 2020 when we first got wind of reforms. GDPR was 2018. So it was sort of like, well, let's have a look at that. They cherry picked a few things from GDPR, and that was what was going in. We've seen other laws in the region come in now that are far more stringent and far more comprehensive and far more GDPR-like. But yeah, so we're in desperate need of an update. I think Hong Kong is seen as not a particularly safe place from a data collection, a data security perspective, not because of security as such, but because the laws aren't really providing that protection. There's really no restrictions on cross-border data transfer, which is really key. No breach notification, which I think we really do need desperately in Hong Kong.
Yeah, well, companies aren't notifying, are they? They're hiding away incidents, and it's it's not good for, well, customers, consumers, partners, etc. So yeah, we
and the penalties are so low that that some clients, well, not my clients of course, but some organizations take it as cost of doing business.
Correct.
To get a fine in Hong Kong, and that's just not how we want to be promoting data protection in Hong Kong or in the region. And I do think there are many, many organizations that care very deeply about data protection in Hong Kong, but there are many that don't, because they don't have the framework or the stick to keep them in line. And it's not until those organizations often suffer an incident that you really see how poorly they handled often quite sensitive data.
Right. So we are heading down the track of notification, though, because obviously the new critical infrastructure bill, cybersecurity bill, came in just recently. And that does require a subset of organizations to notify should they have a breach. What are your views on this new law? Because it has had a bit of controversy, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. I mean, I think in principle, critical infrastructure should be held accountable for its cybersecurity posture. And I think for those bodies and organizations in Hong Kong that are providing critical services, then they should be required to make sure that they can have continuity of those services, and that they're protecting
resilience, I guess.
Those. So yes, exactly, resilience. That they're protecting the services from threat actors and from threats that could disrupt Hong Kong. I think in principle, that's a solid principle. I think where there has been a lot of debate and questions asked is around the extraterritoriality, how far the reach of the law goes. There was much in the guidance saying it's not an extraterritorial law. However, the law can allocate as a critical computer systems which are accessed from Hong Kong. So that indicates that it does touch systems that are outside of Hong Kong. So I think this is where there's some concern, because when you've got systems outside of Hong Kong, they may also be subject to other laws, and then you get sort of like your conflicts of laws positions, because you've got one legal regime wanting the organizations to take one set of measures and another to do another. So there's some concern there. And then so that's one of the sort of the key concerns that we've seen from our clients.
So do you think Hong Kong enforcement will have the necessary stick, if you like, to enforce this? Because it's a whole new department being set up, isn't it, to police this, if you like?
Yeah, and I think that's what I was to get to, was that there is some there's obviously been some discussion about this new body and whether they will have the right set. Obviously they're going to be focusing on sensitive systems, sensitive industries, cybersecurity, whether they'll have the right qualifications to make the right assessments as to what should be in and out of scope, as well as the right level of investigation powers and the right understanding of what they should be doing. So so I think that's the other area where there's been concern around a brand new regulator. We haven't had one for some time.
That's right. It's going to be interesting, isn't it?
So it's going to be very interesting.
Because I'm actually sat in Manila at the moment, and the Philippines. I don't know how much work you do around the region, but you're obviously aware that the Philippines has one of the tightest or strictest data protection laws, but a failure to enforce it in many ways. I guess that's endemic of the whole region in many ways. And look, I'm law enforcement background, and I know how difficult it is to get the right talent and capabilities to actually properly enforce this. It's hard enough for us to find talent in the private sector, never mind in law enforcement.
Yeah, look, and you're absolutely right. And I think there's not a country in the region which could do with a lot more resource and funding for their data protection or cybersecurity authorities, because they are tasked with a big job. One significant incident in a country can unhinge a whole regulator, as they have to focus on that, investigating that, understanding what the organization did, making sure that the containment measures are in place, and many, we've seen it in almost every regulator in the region, because many of them are very new, that they don't have the right skill set to ask the right questions, to investigate, to even make the right directions or enforcement measures at the end of it, because they just really don't know what they're dealing with. Now, we're seeing a huge uptick in maturity as the regulators do settle in. Some of those that have been in place a lot longer now, they're much more predictable when you're dealing with them, can kind of know what's coming down the line. But some of the newer regulators, we're still, it is still very difficult to know how an investigation will roll through and what powers they will exercise or use and how long they will take to do the investigation as well. We've seen some take 7 years to do the investigation, which...
Because that's so challenging for you, isn't it? Because you'll be guiding clients and they'll be asking exactly these kind of questions, what's going to happen with the authorities, how long is it going to take, etc. And when you're, sort of a bit up in the air, and this must be extremely challenging for you.
Absolutely. And I mean, you would know better than anyone else that the life of an IT professional in an organization is often not 7 years.
No.
So when you've got an investigation that's taking that long, often it's the lawyers that are the only ones that